Welcome to the Blue Duck Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right, and welcome to the first ever Blue Duck Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ben, here with Matt. We've been playing fantasy football together for, 6 years now?
We have been in the same leagues for 6 years, yes.
And we've been playing for over 10 years each.
Correct.
Matt first asked me to play in the league in 2013, which I won that very first year, showing my fantasy skills to him. And he won it shortly after, so I guess he knows a little bit about fantasy football as well. As I mentioned, this is our first podcast, so just know the presentation value will get better, and hopefully Matt gets better as well. Why don't you kick it off with the news, Matt?
Okay, well, we will start off with the biggest news of the weekend, and that is Ezekiel Elliott has spotted on a plane back to Dallas. No deal is in place yet, but that is definitely signs that things are moving in the correct direction, that he will be back in Dallas soon.
So Zeke back to being a top 3 pick for you in all leagues?
Zeke is definitely back in the top 3 mix for me. Never
Well-
really came out, honestly.
Anything about Melvin Gordon? The man's jersey's hanging over here?
Unfortunately, no. He appears to be still in his lockout, and he will posted on Instagram last week that he plans on playing in Thursday Night Football. At least that's what everybody's taking from it by the words TNF, by the letters TNF, were the only words on his post. They are in Thursday Night Football game on week 10.
And whereabouts would you draft him if you were drafting today?
Melvin is a tough case. I passed over him a couple times this weekend. In a redraft, I would be looking no earlier than round 4 for Melvin at this point.
Wow, round 4. Yeah, I heard round 2 or 3, and I thought I would probably take him late in the second. All right, any more news?
I have another big name that is also coming back into the NFL. Josh Gordon reinstated. Of course, that's a big news for New England fans, and Josh Gordon will be helping out Tom Brady in his fantasy value, but also hurting the value of the other receivers in New England.
Yeah, and this deal got done pretty quick. I was surprised because they talked about he was asking for reinstatement not that long ago, and he was reinstated without much, no struggle. So I guess the league's moving into just allowing a little bit more drug use. But
It's a lot better than being involved in domestic violence.
yeah, for sure. All right, keep it going.
Next item up for business here is a report out of Tennessee came up today that the starting quarterback position is wide open. Ryan Tannehill is giving Marcus Mariota a run for his money to hold on to that starting job.
Regardless of who wins there, outside of a multi-quarterback league or a super flex, there's no value of the Tennessee quarterback. Anything on the left tackle, Taylor Lewan?
No, I haven't heard anything like that.
Still in the appeal
That
process,
is still,
I guess.
Yeah, no.
Most likely we'll lose since Golden Tate lost his based on trying to have kids.
Yep. Oh, those don't get turned over very often at all.
No.
Next we got here, Antonio Brown called out today for leaving Raiders camp over this helmet issue. He was, in fact, called out today by his GM, basically saying that he is all in or all out. This is his GM, Mike Mayock, saying that.
And that's the former NFL Network personality, Mike Mayock. So I don't really put much stock into this. I've been watching Hard Knocks. He's there practicing. He's at home practicing. He wants to play. He's just being a little bit of a diva. But it's nothing against the team. It's not. The Raiders aren't the problem. It's the NFL. So I'm not too worried about that. I feel confident drafting him exactly where I have him ranked.
So that doesn't change your fantasy stock in him at all?
Nope.
Honestly, it concerns me a little bit that he's leaving camp again. I'm moving him down a little bit this week.
Right.
Last item for newsworthy is Le'Veon Bell, another player that is just back into the NFL. It was said today by Adam Gase that he will not be seeing any reps in the preseason. I think that's a mistake. The guy hasn't played in a year. I would want to get him at least a couple of series for game action before I let him go in week 1.
especially with the new offense, right? Like, it would be different if we went back to Pittsburgh and, like, we're not going to use him because we want to keep him healthy. He knows the blocking scheme's there. He's a unique runner. He's a peekaboo-style runner, so he needs that line to be in sync with what he wants them to do. He definitely should be getting reps. This is worrisome to me. I don't know, how it affects his fantasy value, but it's just seems like an odd decision by the Jets.
Yeah, that's one where it's not changing my fantasy position on him, but it just seems like a really bizarre decision by Adam Gase.
Any more news items?
That is all the news, Ben.
All right. Well, thanks for the news guy. And we're going to move on to what we're talking about today. And it's just going to be an overview of fantasy football. You're going to get maybe a little bit of fantasy football advice, but mostly just getting to know us and getting to know what we like in leagues and what we'll be talking about on this show. So first off, we're going to talk about draft versus auction and our preferences. Matt, why don't you lead us off?
Okay, I definitely prefer the auction style versus draft. For those that don't know, auction style is pretty straightforward. A player goes up. Every player in the league has a chance to bid on them. Whoever bids the most amount of money obviously will be the one that takes home that player, and you have a set amount of cap to build your roster around. The reason I prefer this is that every team has a chance to draft every single player in the league. Whereas if you're in a draft, you get put in spot, say, 4, right off the top that you're getting Kamara, McCaffrey, Zeke, something like that. Not that that's a bad player, but it really takes the strategy out of it. It's you get what player falls to you. You're not trying to go out and pick your own team and build your own team.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. In auction, your strategy for how you draft your team is limitless. You can do whatever you want. You can have the first tier of guys you want in order of where you want them, or at what price you want them, and you miss on one, you go after the other. Versus, as you mentioned, in draft, if you have a top 4 pick, you're getting one of the top 4 running back, and if you don't have a top 4 pick, then you're not getting a top 4 running back. You're forced to now draft in accordance to the players that are around that. It really handcuffs you in the first couple rounds. In the later rounds, not that big of a deal. You can reach out for the player that you want, but in the auction, there's the guarantee that if your player goes up, you can bid on him and then decide, okay, I don't want him at this price, versus somebody reaching for a player that you wanted a round or 2 before you were going to, just takes that away from you. So most of the stuff we'll talk about is going to be draft focused because most people draft. We're hoping to add auction segment probably for next season. We might be able to do a mock auction this year, but that's kind of up in the air right now. Don't know if we'll have time to get to that. But we definitely want to add an auction segment for 2020. So next topic we're going to talk about is going to be dynasty, redraft, keeper, and contract leagues. Matt?
Okay. Similar to the same reason I like auction, I do prefer the contract leagues for just having that monetary value in play. I like to be able to manage my roster based off of dollar figures. I feel more like a real-life GM. Might sound a little bit corny, but that is something that I actually like a lot about the leagues that I'm in.
And again, we're talking contract. We're talking multiple-year contracts, so there are a lot of websites where you can draft somebody and put them on a 1, a 2, or 3, or a 4-year contract. We play in a league 2 leagues actually, where we share a team on RSO, Reality Sports Online, where they have that feature. And you're limited for the contracts that you have. Outside of contracts, the multiple-year contracts leagues, what would be your next bet? Dynasty, keeper, redraft?
Keeper is my next most popular one or favorite one. Just because Dynasty, you're essentially stuck with the same roster forever. Keeper, I like especially with Keeper, you can definitely have different functionalities, and it makes it a little bit more skillful in that you can have a rule where you can keep the player in the certain round that you've taken them. You have different ways of maneuvering to keep the league a little bit more strategic to have a keeper value in there. That's my thought there.
Yeah, I actually played in my first Dynasty league last year, which I won. But I played in a lot of keeper leagues, and I've always liked the keeper version of it because I didn't like the rookie draft where, you finish poorly, you're going to get the best rookie, and now you have him on your roster. That's why in a keeper league where you do have that draft or auction, that player's up for anybody to take at a certain spot or at a certain value. So I like that aspect of it as well. And for Dynasty to really work, you need to have good team owners because you need to trade. Like, there has to be a lot of trading going on in the league. So redraft is our least favorite. Matt, why don't you tell us about some redraft?
My biggest issue with redraft is in a redraft league, if you have a player that is doing really poorly off the hop, that person may become non-existent in your league. It really skews how the league is run for the rest of the season. That is my biggest issue with redraft leagues. You need 12, 14, 10 active players. It usually runs pretty well, but again, there's no incentive for that last player to be active aside from sportsmanship, really.
Absolutely. And when you get to as you mentioned, if a team doesn't do well out of the gates and they're not going to make the playoffs, you need to have an owner that's really playing for bragging rights and spite to just ruin somebody else's season, or else you're going to get owners that just throw in the towel. But unfortunately, we're going to be talking about redraft pretty much every week here on the Blue Duck Fantasy Football podcast, because that's what most people play, and that's fine. The week-to-week stuff for redraft is more exciting than anything, the starting lineups and all the waiver wire moves that you need to do, whereas in Dynasty League, you're going to get less waiver wire moves because they're going to be deeper rosters, so we're going to get to talk about a lot more interesting stuff. Moving on here, we're going to talk about league size. You have an 8-team league, 10-team league, 12, 14, 16, 32. Matt, what's your preference?
My preference is 12. I feel like that's the perfect balance. You're going to have a good bench, but you're also going to still have some waiver wire talent available. 8, if you ask me, is just far too shallow. Everybody's got a stacked team. 10, that's kind of where I'm borderline on. The bench players are still really good. You still feel like you've got stacked teams all around, but it's a lot better than 8. Just because 8 is just way too stacked all around. 14-team league, this is my biggest league that I currently play in. The benches are extremely thin. So it's a lot of draft and draft well in that league, which is no problem with that. Of course, there's always going to be somebody that pops up on waiver wire almost every week that now has value. 16-team league, I've never actually played with it, but given my experience in this 14-team league, I can't imagine what that waiver wire would look like. Maybe you have more to add on a 16-team there.
I've never actually played in a 16-team either. 14 is the biggest I've played, and I didn't mind it, although, as you mentioned, the waiver wire gets very thin. Like, if you have a bad draft, well, too bad. Better luck next year. But, again, when you get to 8, I've never played an 8-team league either, but everybody just has a superstar team, and there's still, fantastic players on the waiver wire. So if you're newer to fantasy, that wouldn't be a bad idea since you don't know the players that well. If you haven't followed football for that long. If you're newer to football and fantasy football, playing in an 8-team league might not be the worst thing. I started 2 10-team leagues last year, and they're both super flex / 2 quarterback. And I don't mind it. I didn't really see the big difference. So anywhere between 10 to 14 to me is the sweet spot, and I'm fine with that.
Do you have a specific order of preference of these 5 team leagues in that 12, 8, 10, 14, and 16?
I think you just want to balance because we obviously play in more than one league. I wouldn't want to play all 12. I wouldn't want to play all 14 or all 10. I definitely wouldn't mind playing in one 16-team league, giving it a try, and then maybe moving on to 32 where everybody's an NFL team. I've seen those before. I've never played in one, but definitely be interesting. So we'll just move on now to talking about scoring. What is your favorite scoring, Matt?
I don't have a favorite scoring system, as bizarre as that is to say. Basically, when I'm looking at a league, I base it off of the scoring system as how I draft or buy my team. I don't have a personal preference. Some people like PPR because they like to have just really high scores. That's personal preference. Personally, I don't care if I win a game 32-10 or if I win a game, 150-120. It really doesn't make a difference to me. I just make sure I adjust as per the scoring categories there.
Definitely half PPR for me. It is my favorite. I don't care for standard anymore, to be honest with you. I used to play standard, and then the first year I played half PPR, I thought, this is going to be insane. These players are going to have so much more value. And I do get the appeal to PPR, because every time your player catches the ball, you can celebrate because you got a point. Regardless of yards, there's something to celebrate. So I definitely prefer half, then PPR, then standard.
Interesting.
Another thing that I didn't mention we're going to talk about, but I'm going to bring it up. We're both on the same wavelength here, is that kickers are not they shouldn't be in fantasy. We're both opposed to that.
Correct. I am also, like Ben said, I disagree with having kickers in leagues. There's just no skill there picking a kicker for me. They're just so random. I just don't like them. I don't really know what else to say about it.
Yeah, and when it comes to defense, we won't be talking much about defenses on this website. We're definitely not going to talk at all about kickers. You ask which kicker we should start, we're going to tell you should join a league that doesn't have kickers starting. In our league of record, we use IDP, which is individual defensive players. We're definitely not going to get into that, but if you do have questions about, which DST or defense you should start that week, feel free to throw it, and I will pass it over to Matt, who usually does all of our decisions for our 2 RSO teams that have defenses on that. But that's basically kind of general introduction to fantasy and the different types of fantasies out there. There are more things that you can talk about. Like you could talk about having a waiver wire budget versus priority, but we won't get into that today. We're going to talk about some of our recent posts that we've had on the site, blueduckfantasy.com. You may have seen them on Instagram as well. So we're going to talk about the last post. We had the avoid and the targets, and we got a little bit of some hate from people who are not happy that I had selected Deshaun Watson as somebody to avoid this year. I want to make it clear, it's not a talent thing. It's a price. You have Deshaun Watson coming in, drafted in, the 4th, 5th round, which is quite high for a quarterback. We're big on waiting on quarterbacks. You have the injury risk with Deshaun Watson because he runs the ball and takes some big hits quite often. So you're using your 4th or 5th round pick where you can get a quality starter for your team, and you're using it on a quarterback that could end up missing half the season. And even if he does play and he's great, he's not going to be significantly better than the quarterbacks that go later. So definitely not a personal thing. You understand that when you're going into your draft or auction, you want to get the best value. You want to get your Patrick Mahomes, who went in like the 10th or 11th round last year, who finished number 1. That's how you win a league. Getting the standard, I got a good running back in the 1st round, a good wide receiver in the 2nd, good running back in the 3rd, quarterback in the 4th, and they all finish about where you drafted them, isn't going to win you your league. Matt, you got anything for us?
No, just to basically reiterate your point was everybody's got a value, and the way you win your league, like Ben was kind of touched on, you're getting the best value on your later picks. I mean, you're going to win with picking somebody way later on versus, like you said, Deshaun Watson versus somebody, say, who was in the targets, Kirk Cousins. Going way later in drafts, they're probably going to end up fairly similar. Sure, Deshaun Watson may end up slightly higher, but it's not going to be significant. And you're going to have a better running back or wide receiver, whatever you choose to take in round 4 or 5, possibly tight end with Ertz or Kelsey or Kittle, if they happen to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the case is, yeah, you're definitely going to want to wait on someone like that. Again, this year is so deep on quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, we can't stress enough how deep it is on quarterback. Something we're going to be talking about as we go through all the teams is this quarterback is great, but there are about 15 other quarterbacks that you can draft. And outside of Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, possibly Luck if he's healthy, a lot of the guys are just going to be bunched up in kind of that like 6 to 15 plus range. And the value you're going to get from any of them is going to be pretty similar. Another thing is we have our rankings that came out this week. They didn't have Josh Gordon in them. The next rankings will. By the time this airs, the Dynasty rankings should be on the site. They will have Josh Gordon in them. So welcome back, Josh Gordon. And that was all I had. Matt, you have anything else?
I've got just something fun we can do just to end off the day here. Why don't we test your knowledge on last season a little bit?
Putting me on the spot, are you?
Are you prepared for something like this?
Not at all.
It's going to be a doozy.
But I welcome the challenge, so bring it on.
Okay. Well, I actually am going to take it a little easy on you. I'm going to give you 8 shots at this to name for me the top 5 passing yard leaders from last season.
The top 5?
Yeah. Spoiler alert, Larry Fitzgerald is not one of them.
Not one of the passing leaders, Larry Fitzgerald?
Correct.
All right, let me just Google. All right, it's top 5 passing leaders in yards, not fantasy points, from 2018.
Correct.
I'm going to start off with Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes is number 2.
Number 2?
Yes. Caught me off guard as well.
Wow. That's interesting. All right, so we're looking for the top 5. Patrick Mahomes at number 2. Mind-blowing. I'm going to go with Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck is correct. He is number 5.
Ooh, got the tough one. Number 5's out of the way. So 4, 3, and 1. Gonna go with Matt Ryan.
Matt Ryan is also there, number 3.
Ooh, I am killing this.
You are.
I definitely know that Drew Brees isn't there because he had a down year. So did Matt Stafford. I want to say, just trying to go through the league here. Tom Brady also with a down year. You know what? Ben Roethlisberger.
Big Ben is number 1.
Ooh, really?
5,129 yards. Pat Mahomes was 5,097. You have gone 4 for 4. Can you go a perfect 5 for 5 and make yourself look really good for our listeners in week 1?
Oh my God, the pressure. It's going to take me a second. So why don't you fill some time as I get the answer to this question.
I am not going to kill any time for you. You are going right on the spot, man.
All right, so I'm thinking of a name. I'm not saying this name, so this isn't my answer. And I'm not going to try to judge your reaction. But
You're gonna have a stone face for me.
I'm definitely thinking Phillip Rivers. I'm not saying Phillip Rivers, but he's one of the ones that I'm thinking. But I don't know if he was that high. Let's try to go through the divisions. And it's definitely not San Francisco. Definitely not Seattle. Ooh, it might be Goff. Goff is another interesting name. But I don't think it's Goff. I got Rivers ahead of Goff. Definitely wasn't Rosen in Arizona. Definitely wasn't anybody from the Dolphins or the Bills or the Jets. And definitely wasn't Brady. Wasn't Romo or wasn't Dak. Wasn't Wentz. Wasn't anybody in Washington. Wasn't Eli.
I'll send you my reasoning for throwing the Larry Fitzgerald comment in there. He was 1 for 1 with 1 touchdown last year with like 30-something yards.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that.
Clarification. You seemed confused.
I was.
There's nothing that
I
guy
don't
can't
think
do.
it's Deshaun Watson. If it's Deshaun Watson, I'm just going to get more hate about Deshaun Watson. I'm going to say Phillip Rivers.
You, sir, have got strike number 1.
Ah!
It is not Phillip Rivers.
Sorry, I let everyone down. We can just
You
edit
did.
this in post, and we'll get the right answer. Then balloons will come down from the ceiling. All right, well, let's go with Jared Goff.
Sir, you should have picked him first. He is number 4. You have gone 5 for 6 on your guesses. That's not bad.
I feel like I should just maybe quit fantasy football forever, not knowing this stat. But I won't. I'll be back next week, or later this week, whenever we get a chance to do this again. Anyways, this has been our first podcast. Matt, got anything to say before we go?
For the record, Phillip Rivers was number 8.
Where did Deshaun Watson finish?
Number 11.
And you want to draft him in the 4th or 5th round? You people are crazy. Anyways, that's it.